Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining to our workshop today about heated work, awareness raising, and action plans across Europe. What can we learn from each other? Um, I'm very glad that we get to organize this workshop today. My name is Markus Lerchbaum. I'm working at the Central Labor Inspectorate here in Austria as part of the Ministry of Labor. And I primarily work at the topic of heated work and also climate change, and in the context of OSH, Occupational Safety and Health. First of all, I want to say thank you to the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, EU-OSHA, for providing the resources for today's workshop. And also, I want to say thank you to Stefanie Bühn and Verena Kantovic from the German Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs who co-organized this workshop today. It was also Stefanie and Verena and I were discussing some of the measures of Austria and Germany regarding heated work, and this is how this workshop came kind of was created, the idea of this workshop, and we're very happy that it actually now is being executed. I also want to say thank you to Martina Heckelbucher, our focal point from Austria, who always helps with organizing these workshops, and to connect to maybe also all of you, other focal points or experts on occupational safety and health. And also thank you to Anna-Sophie Ecker, from the Central Labor Inspectorate, who will also take a look at the questions. And also thank you to our agency, Putz and Stingel, for taking care of the technical affairs today. So the goal for today, I would say, is that it's clear that heat at work is a big topic right now in all of Europe. In May, we already had the first heat wave with some tragic consequences in Europe. So it's very present. And I think all of the member states in the European Union are taking action. But what we think is lacking is exchange among member states to really, share experience and learn from another how to better protect workers from rising heat and how to best support companies with implementing heat protection at work. So this is really our main focus, to also go past the theory and try to focus on implementation and our experiences with it. Yeah. Um, just a quick look on the timetable. We will start with a presentation from Maurizio Curtarelli from EU-OSHA about evidence on climate change and OSH. And then we have two countries presenting their experiences, their findings, their projects, Austria and Italy. Then we have the first discussion block where we really put the question, what can we learn from each other, into the center. Then we will have a short break. And then we continue with our second country block, which includes Finland, Germany, and Spain. And then we will have our final discussion. I'm very glad that we get to have quite a diverse selection of countries here to also represent different conditions in Europe. So thank you to all the speakers for participating today. And then we will approximately end at around 12:40. So with that being said, I think I will stop my presentation and hand over to Maurizio Curtarelli from EU-OSHA. He's a senior research project manager at EU-OSHA. His work focuses on the impact of climate change and digitalization of work on occupational safety and health, and with a particular attention to psychosocial risks and mental health. He has led and contributed to several EU-wide research projects, including the OSH Pulse survey, I think, which we will also hear from today. And he also holds a master in social research methods and statistics and a PhD in economics, and has extensive experience in labor market analysis and research on working conditions and OSH at the European level. Thank you very much for joining, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Markus, for the kind invitation to this webinar. Very relevant, as you have mentioned, we had the first heat wave right now, and luckily now in Bilbao it's fresher, but it has been quite a hell for around 10 days. So I should be now in the presentation mode. Yeah, at HeatFit we have been working on the topic of heat at work in the framework of the research on climate change. Um, Climate change can be defined as a long-term shift in weather conditions measured by changes in temperature, precipitation, wind, snow cover, and other indicators, which represent the greatest health challenge of the 21st century with major threats to life, health, and well-being. Climate change poses a range of risks for OSH. That's why it is relevant for OSH. Increased temperatures, heat waves are posing a risk for workers, especially for some categories of workers. Air pollution, either indoor or outdoor, is also a risk for related to OSH. Increased ultraviolet radiation exposure, extreme weather events, storm, floods that are becoming more frequent and more intense at all latitudes in Europe, vector-borne diseases due to the expanded habitats due to the global warming of some insects, pests like ticks or fleas or mosquitoes that are bringing illnesses such as malaria in countries where it didn't exist previously. The use of extended use of agrochemicals also poses a threat to workers in especially in the sector of agriculture. Increased use of agrochemicals due to these additional, let's say, pests that are becoming an issue. And finally, mental health risk. The literature clearly indicates that there is a growing anxiety and a range of other, let's say, mental health issues related to climate change. Climate change in sorry. Yeah, climate change in a way acts as a multiplier of risks. First of all, it increases the prevalence, distribution, and severity of exposure to known risks, but results in increased incidence, mortality, and injury. But at the same time, there are new risks that are arising due to the interaction of these known risks with these changed conditions in the environment. I mentioned that workers in some sectors and jobs may be at greater risks depending if the work is performed outdoor or indoor. Workers in agriculture, construction, for example, are more exposed to some risks related to climate change. Some worker groups may be particularly vulnerable because of their, let's say, position in the labor market. Let's think about migrants, for example, that are segregated in sectors that are already with several, let's say, bad, poor working conditions. Individuals may be affected differently depending on, for example, conditions that they might have, age. Aging workers are impacted differently, for example, from climate change, and also any kind of disability that can make them especially vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And finally, the impact on new member states that varies depending obviously on location, the geography of the country, which is also linked to the response that is given in policy terms to the impacts of climate change on OSH. At HeatFit, we have been quite active already in the past about on the topic of climate change and OSH. We have carried out a number of studies in specific sector or covering specific type of jobs, for example, in agriculture or the emergency workers like firemen, fire people, yeah. And then we have been as well analyzing the effects of climate change mitigating measures, so OSH of workers in green jobs in the sector of wind energy or in the sector of green construction. We have been analyzing the emerging biological risks, ticks, mosquitoes, fleas, that I also mentioned. And we have also drafted, and we are promoting since 2024 guidance for workplaces on heat at work. We have published a quite pioneering paper on eco-anxiety and a number of OSH wikis that are free for consultation on our website. And we are publishing in these days these two other pieces of research: a discussion paper on the use of digital technologies for climate change risk prevention, and a new foresight study on climate change and OSH. We have also, at the end of June last year, so 1 year ago, made available a new OIRA tool, our online interactive risk assessment tool for heat and cold at work, that can be easily accessed by companies, workplaces, to carry out a risk assessment that takes into account as well the risks related to heat and cold at work. Another research activity that we carried out is the OSH pools, a representative, a sample, a worker survey that is carried out on a probabilistic sample representative of workers in all EU-27 countries, plus Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland. A telephone survey involving more than 25,000 participants. The topic areas, among the topic areas, we have been focusing specifically on exposure to risk related to climate change, psychosocial risk factors, stress and mental health also in relation to climate change, health outcomes including those specific to climate change, and finally OSH preventive measures with a focus in particular on climate change. All the findings from this survey are available on our website, also in the languages, in the national languages of the countries when it comes to country fact sheets in particular. Okay. Now I'm going to present some of the findings from the report. First of all, we asked workers if in the last 12 months they have been exposed to the following factor: extreme heat either indoors or outdoors, that was reported by 20% of workers; intense sun exposure reported by 11.5% of workers; air quality issues either indoor or outdoors, such as pollen, dust or smoke, reported by more than 19% of workers; and extreme weather related events, for example floods, wildfires, droughts or hurricanes, reported by 9% of workers. All in all, 1/3 of European workers report to be exposed to at least one climate change related risk of these four. The analysis of the data by sector, first of all, confirms what it's already quite known based on the evidence that is reported in the literature. So we have sectors such as agriculture, construction, the energy sector, and to a lesser extent commerce, transport, accommodation or food services, that are the sectors where workers most frequently report to be exposed to these climate change related risks, with probably extreme heat and intense sun exposure being the two most prevalent in some of the sectors. When we look then at the breakdown by occupations, also in this case we can easily identify that workers in manual occupations, skilled workers, semi-skilled workers, unskilled workers, and mostly farm workers, are those more frequently reporting exposure to these four climate change related risks, with proportions of workers that are well beyond 50% for some categories of manual workers, in contrast to what happens on the other hand on professional and technical occupations, administrator occupations, clerical occupations, let's say more office-based jobs that are, let's say, less exposed to climate change-related risks. If we look then at the proportions of workers reporting exposure to climate change-related risks based on where they perform their work, we see that definitely outdoor workers are those most frequently reporting exposure to this factor, especially to heat. For example, if we see workers working in outside site like construction site, agricultural field, streets of a city, or those working in a car or another vehicle. If we look then at the exposure, for example, to heat, to extreme heat, either indoors or outdoors by country, we see clearly that some countries have workers in some countries report more frequently exposure to heat than in other countries. We have at the very top of this ranking Greece and Cyprus, with 35 and 30% of workers reporting exposure to extreme heat, but Spain, Italy, several of the countries that are represented in this webinar today are all, let's say, above the average of the European Union. Norway is the country that records the lower proportion of workers reporting exposure to extreme heat. When it comes to exposure to extreme weather-related events like floods, wildfires, droughts, or hurricanes, we see Ireland in the first at the top of this ranking, with 21% of workers reporting exposure to this type of risks, and Netherlands at the very bottom of the ranking, with only 3% of workers reporting exposure to this risk. Another indicator that we could collect through our survey is the preoccupation for the impact of climate change on OSH. So we asked workers if they are worried that climate change related issues could impact their safety and health at work, or if they were afraid that the current job and task could change as a result of measures introduced to prevent climate change related risks. These are two important indicators because they are predictors of mental health issues. The first one is reported by about 32% of workers, and being afraid of changes to job and tasks as a consequence of climate change is reported by 18% of workers. Again, the analysis by sectors clearly indicates that the sectors such as agriculture, construction, and the energy sector are those where workers more frequently report these concerns. But we can see that the concern about especially the impact of climate change on OSH, it's quite widespread in all sectors. In all sectors, regardless if it's let's say outdoor based activity sector or if it's office based sector. When it comes to the occupations, we see again here that the blue collar, the manual worker jobs, workers in these jobs are more frequently concerned about the impact of climate change on OSH, but we see also in this case that also in other types of jobs there is concern about this impact on OSH. We then asked workers about health problems caused or made worse by their job. So we asked for a number of health issues, including overall fatigue, headaches, high strain, stress, depression, or anxiety, musculoskeletal disorders, infectious diseases, and two indicators specifically related to heat and to climate change. One, it's heat-related symptoms or illnesses, illnesses like dizziness, cramps, exhaustion, and stroke that was reported by 7% of workers, and sunburn reported by 3% of workers. We had also asked about accident or injuries and other health problems related to your work. When it comes again to occupations, we see that the impact of heat-related, let's say, the outcome of heat-related symptoms or illnesses reported in the last 12 months is higher again for workers in manual work jobs. If we then analyze in the correlation between the exposure to climate change risks by report of health issues, we can see that workers reporting health issues are more likely to report exposure to climate change risks. For any of the risks that we have surveyed, and there is a positive, highly significant correlation between exposure to any of these risks and experiencing health issues. In a similar way, looking at the accident or injuries, and in line with what is reported in the literature, we see that workers reporting accidents or injuries in the last 12 months are more likely to report exposure to climate change risks. And we see that there is a positive, highly significant correlation between exposure to any of these risks and accident or injuries, and in particular between extreme heat and accident or injuries. Also, analyzing the correlation between the concerns, the preoccupation about the impact of climate change and health issues, we can see that workers reporting mental health issues are more likely to report concern about the impact of climate change. There is a positive and highly significant correlation between concerns and stress, depression, or anxiety. So what can workplaces do to protect workers from climate change risks? Well, the literature has several indications, several suggestions, let's say, in this area. In this slide, where I report some information about types of interventions in the workplace to protect workers from heat stress, that is taken by a publication from Flores based on let's say important milestone, I would say, publication from the ILO of 2024, we see that a number of organizational measures or the provision of personal protective equipment or cool, shaded and ventilated rest areas, the provision of training, education and awareness, etc., are all, let's say, important elements to protect workers from heat stress. So, taking into account what is reported in the literature, we asked workers if in their workplace there were this type of measures available. We found that in 30% of workers reported that in their workplace there is information and training about how to handle heat and other climate change related risks in their job. 58% of workers reported that in their workplace there are adjustments to the organization of work. For example, the introduction of flexible working time, so working in outside like the hottest hour of the day, regular breaks, job rotation, and so on. For 1/4 of workers, there is the consultation of workers about climate change related concerns is in place in their workplace. And finally, 55% of workers reported that in their workplace other measures to protect workers from heat and climate change related risks, for example thermal insulation, cooling system, the creation of these let's say cool areas, etc., are available. Once again, the breakdown by sectors shows let's say, I would say an encouraging somehow story, because we see that the sectors where these measures are more available are also the sectors where workers report more frequently exposure to these risks: agriculture, energy, and construction, with, as a surprise, somehow the manufacturing or engineering sector. To conclude, I mentioned what we have done so far, but I would like to mention as well what we have in the pipeline. So we have launched at the end of last year a new research program on OSH and climate change, thanks to a scoping exercise, an expert workshop that we held in Bilbao at the end of September 2025, putting together 20 experts from several countries in Europe. We could identify the priority areas that will inform our research program. So these are listed here: facts and figures, evidence collection and data gaps, mapping and analysis of climate-related OSH risks, air quality and climate change, qualitative analysis of sectors and jobs and groups of vulnerable workers, health outcomes and mental health, workplace measures and tools, and finally a mapping of policies, legislation and collective agreements. We have already launched, and we are running a number of projects in several of these priority areas, and more are to come later this year and next year. Just to mention some of them: a guidance for workplaces on floods and extreme weather events, data analysis to identify and analyze groups of workers at risk, a paper analyzing the impact of climate change on aging workers, an in-depth analysis of mental health impact of climate change, including as well case studies, a report on measurement issues and data collection and analysis, also to identify what are the gaps and bring that to the attention of the policy makers, a mapping of policy and regulation in the EU member states, an indoor air pollution project in collaboration with the European Environment Agency, and sector analysis in some specific sector. The one on agriculture is being conducted together with the joint research sector in Seville. Just to mention as well that we have available a new web page that I invite you to visit on climate change and occupational safety and health. From this web page you will access all the information that we will be producing, including all the reports, all the papers, etc., that will be made available during this research program. And also to mention that EU-OSHA is part of the European Climate and Health Observatories with a range of other institutions, including Eurofound, the European Environment Agency, the European Commission, World Health Organization, the International Organization for Migration, just to mention a few of them, which will allow us, first of all, to create a bit of a momentum, hopefully, on this, and to mainstream OSH as well in a number of other areas of knowledge, and also to promote our research findings in a more let's say a wider network. And I would like to conclude with this short NAPO film on heat at work that displays the problem and the solutions as well in a nice way. So with this, I finish my presentation. Many thanks for your attention. I stop sharing, and yeah, I'm here for any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maurizio. I will also give a applause emoji because that's what you do online, right? Thank you very much for this great overview of the evidence and all the impressive projects that EU-OSHA is doing. Then I continue with my presentation about the Hitzeschutzverordnung, the new legislation in Austria to protect outdoor workers from heat and UV radiation. I think it connects well because Maurizio already also mentioned that outdoor workers are particularly affected by climate change related risks, particularly heat, of course. And in Austria, the Hitzeschutzverordnung, this new legislation is quite, new and recent. And I not only want to talk about the content of this new legislation, but also our experiences with the ongoing implementation. Yeah. So let's start. So, general information about this new legislation, the HeatFit. It's a new legislation to further protect outdoor workers from rising heat and natural UV radiation. And it's an implementation of the government program, and it's in effect since January 1st, 2026. And I mean, it has been quite a rush actually. There was this kind of planned to from the government to have this legislation, and there were just a couple of months to actually come up with a draft, and then everything went on from there. So it was quite a rush, and also it hasn't been a long time since it has been in effect. But there are some first findings, first experiences with the implementation so far. So the legal basis of this new legislation is, of course, the Health and Safety at Work Act, the Arbeitnehmerinnen-Schutzgesetz, which is the transposition of the Framework Directive, the European Framework Directive. And this new Hitzeschutzverordnung applies to all outdoor work where workers are or may be exposed to heat or natural UV radiation. There is an exception, namely light outdoor work, which lasts no more than 60 minutes per day. So this is not part of the legislation. But in general, it covers a quite range of sectors, and of course, particularly affected are construction workers, farmers, but also people working in postal services or gardeners, etc. So everyone who just works out there for quite some time, and also particularly who are working heavy, who are performing heavy work. Okay, so what's new? The Hitzeschutzverordnung is, as you all know, in occupational safety and health, there is this general obligation of companies to evaluate and assess risks, and based on this evaluation to take measures. And this new legislation kind of specifies the requirements of risk assessments for companies. So for now on, employers in Austria need to consider the level of heat and UV exposure, work intensity, additional heat sources and reflections, personal protective equipment, risks for vulnerable workers, acclimatization, and special risks during heat waves. So this is so all people who work outdoors or all companies who hire people working outdoors, they need to consider these risks during summer as well. And something that I forgot, which is also important, it's not only about heat, but always also about UV radiation. But of course, UV radiation can also be a topic in colder months, in particular in Austria, in the mountains. But this is not covered by this legislation. So it's always UV radiation in combination with heat. So there is this obligation to assess these risks due to heat and UV exposure, and based on these risks, appropriate measures need to be defined. And here there are two major pillars. First, we have the protection program, which needs to be defined. So here the company defines measures according to the STOP principle. I think all of you know this. So you start with substituting the risk. But of course, this is quite hard when it comes to heat and UV radiation. And then you do technical measures, organizational measures, and personal measures. And these measures are defined in this protection program. In the legislation, there is also a description of some of the measures that companies can implement. For example, shifting work to cooler daytimes, reducing intensity of workload, etc. But this is, of course, always depending on the context of the workplace. And so we have the protection program, and then we have the other pillar, namely emergency measures, which need to be, if there are symptoms of heat-related health risks, then you also have to define emergency measures, what to do in such circumstances. And now this is kind of also the most tricky question, like at what point is it obligatory to implement the measures? So not only to define them, but also when do companies really have to implement them? And in Austria, it has been decided that protection measures must be in place once the National Meteorology Authority issues a heat warning of minimum level 2. So this means 30 degrees apparent temperature. This is kind of the trigger for so that protection measures must be in place. The apparent temperature is a metric. Maybe some people know it. It's a lot more accurate than just using air temperature because on top of air temperature, it also considers relative humidity and wind speed. So it is more accurate when it comes to actual heat burden. And it's kind of the basis for the heat warning. These heat warnings are available online. There's a 5-day forecast. You can also use the link to check it out. But what's also important is that in Austria we have this national heat protection plan, and it is based on this heat warning system. So this kind of also creates synergies with public health institutions, which also use this heat warning. So I think this is a positive example. How do these heat warnings look like? Because of course they also differ from country to country. But in Austria, as I said, the level 2 is important for this new Hitzeschutzverordnung, this new legislation. And it starts at around 30 degrees apparent temperature. Here you can also see how this looks like in practice. So you have the map of Austria. This is from last year of July. And then you have, some of the areas are yellow. So this is again the trigger for having protection measures in place. And then what is important, I think, to know is that it's or something that is very positive about using these heat warnings as trigger is that it's accessible to everyone and it's quite easy to understand. And this is something that was very important for this legislation, that you have these colors, and if there's yellow, then this means that protection measures must be in place. Of course, one might question why it's already at the second level and not the third. This is mainly because heat warnings do not consider additional burden due to work intensity, due to protection equipment, etc. So usually people working outdoors are not only exposed to these meteorological factors, but also other heat related burden or work related burden. Which is also interesting is in 2025 in Austria, the red warning was issued for the first time. Of course, this is concerning, and we hope that this summer it won't be the case. But of course, we never know, and climate change is intensifying. So this is something which always needs to be considered at the risk assessment anyway. So if the warning is at orange or red, then of course measures must be more strict or more intense to protect workers thoroughly. We not only have this protection program, but we also have other provisions in this new legislation, namely that cranes must be equipped with a cooling device by June 2027. So there's still some time to implement that. But it's an important provision because there have been some cases in Austria in the past where there have been fatalities in cranes which were not cooled. And then there's another provision regarding new vehicles in surface mineral extracting industry and on construction sites, which must have air conditioning. So if there are new vehicles being bought in 2026, then they must have air conditioning, which is anyway usually the case already. And this also applies to vehicles in comparable work sites. For instance, if there is so much dust around you that you cannot open the window for fresh air, then this would apply to this vehicle as well. Then, as so often in occupational safety and health, information and training of workers is key so that protection measures have an effect and that they're being understood and implemented properly. And in this new legislation, there are provisions regarding information and training on potential hazards from heat and natural UV radiation, recognition of heat-related health effects, access to current heat warnings and UV index, protective measures, and what's also new is this option for a medical examination. What do I mean by that? So workers who are affected by natural UV radiation during warm months, so who fall under the umbrella of the Hitzeschutzverordnung, they now have the option for a voluntary medical examination. This should help to detect and treat early signs of UV-related skin cancer. And for your information, white skin cancer has been recognized in Austria as an occupational disease since 2024. So this is a measure to really strengthen prevention in this area. Now, of course, this is a challenge for many companies, and we tried to really implement some guidance documents to support companies. For instance, we introduced a checklist for companies who are affected by heat at work outdoors. And we try to keep it as simple as possible and to really make it as understandable as possible. And the same kind of document in a very similar form has been produced for construction sites in particular, because they are, as you all know, particularly affected by heated work outdoors. So this is why there has been a separate document for construction workers or construction companies. Another way how we try to support companies is we have this commented version of the legislation, the Hitzeschutzverordnung, on the website of the labor inspection. Um, this is to make it more tangible, to not only have this legislation text, but to also include examples, etc. Yeah, to really help companies understand the legislation. But it's anyway quite a short one, and yeah, but this is an additional support. And something that is also, of course, always important is the contact to the local labor inspectorate. They're always it's free to just call them or send them an email and ask about this legislation and what companies now need to consider. So this is, of course, also yeah, important. We also, I mean, we didn't have a lot of time to really make huge awareness campaigns, but did some things always in coordination with other actors who are involved. So these are really just some more in-depth information sheets for companies. And then we also did some posters. And something that I already mentioned was this National Heat Protection Plan on Austria. And this is something that I think is a good practice because now there's also like an additional small chapter on heat at work, which was not previously included in the National Heat Protection Plan. And yeah, this new legislation kind of triggered also more cooperation with public health agencies and the other health administrations. And I'm very glad that now we have a more coordinated uh, way of tackling the problem of heat. So I want to close with some of our experiences so far with the implementation of this new legislation. I think what's clear is that there's more awareness about the dangers and possible measures regarding heat and UV radiation for outdoor work because there has been a broad media coverage on this new legislation. So this, I think, really helped to increase awareness in all of Austria. And I also think from my experience and from the experience of my colleagues, these heat warnings are an accessible tool, a really appropriate trigger for this, because you could also, have like big uh, documents of this temperature needs to be in place with this work intensity, and then it gets quite complex. I think these heat warnings are pretty easy to understand. And on top of that, in the case of Austria, it also created some synergies with this National Heat Protection Plan. Something that I also want to emphasize is this very constructive collaboration with social partners. This is, I think, also the case because the focus was always to facilitate the continuation of work. So it was never about when is it too hot, when does work need to be stopped, but it was always what do companies have to do so that the burden gets less and that workers can continue their work while remaining safe. So I think this facilitated really constructive talks and collaboration with many actors. And again, a lot of actors are responsible and kind of are working in the field of heat. So a good coordination is required and also then creates new potential for cooperation in other topics as well. Yeah, the concrete effect of this new legislation on workplaces, the level of safety and health is still to be determined. We have some smaller research projects going on which look at that, and of course also the experience of the labor inspectors. But again, it will be the first summer where they will control the implementation of the Hitzeschutzverordnung. So we will see how this will work. As always, there's also room for improvement. I think what we noticed in Austria is that, we really want to push forward this notion of early planning so that companies really start to plan heat and UV radiation measures as early as possible because it's too late to just start when when already a heat warning is being issued. particularly when it comes to UV radiation, because as many know, it's already a topic in April and in particular in May. So we really try to, yeah, focus more on this early planning of measures. Then something which is also in Austria the case is that often personal measures are being focused. And I hope, or we hope, that this legislation creates an incentive that more collective measures are being implemented, so that shading will become normal in Austria, because right now there's still too much focus on just providing clothes to protect from sun, sunscreen, and water, which of course is also important, but I think there's room for improvement regarding shading and cooling. And we also have some room for improvement regarding available data in some areas, but there's some research projects being done, and I'm hopeful that this will be better in the future. Yeah, so far from my presentation. Thank you very much for the attention. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to put them into chat for now, because we will have our colleague from Italy, our neighbor, um, continuing with the presentation. Okay, there are two questions in the chat. Maybe we will pick them up now, very briefly, because I think we still have some time. Maurizio, I think the first question is for you. Will EU-OSHA be setting the standard or issuing guidance on competent advisors, specialists for assessing the risk of the thermal environment, similar to British Occupational Hygiene Society M502?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's not currently in the plans, but it's definitely a good suggestion. We will conduct research the first year on more general topics, and then could work on a guidance of this type in the next few years. So yeah, noted, and we will discuss internally if. It will be one of our projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And now there's this question of, could you send the link to this site with heat stress in UV maps? I'm not sure what exactly. It's probably the heat warnings, I guess. The heat warnings you should find on this website that I just posted. But if you mean the UV index, there's another website for that. But usually what we communicate to companies is if it's from May to September, if it's from 11 to 3 p.m., and if there are no clouds, then you could say that UV burden is high enough to have protection measures in place. But for this legislation, the heat legislation, UV radiation always matters in the context of the heat warnings. So this, I think, is why these heat warnings are most important to look at if you're a company. Then there's this question: how do you plan to shift working hours to cooler times if you have mandatory resting times between shifts, 11 hours in Germany? Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, in some cases, it's not possible to shift working hours. Then you have to start implementing other measures, of course. We also have made the experience that in many cases, it's not possible to work early in the day or to shift work organization. So then technical measures must be in place. Should we also consider the management of heat stress for winter as well due to workload, protective equipment? For winter, so the Hitzeschutzverordnung is not dealing with the conditions during winter. So this, I think, yeah, maybe I need to read it later again. But so I don't break my promise that we'd have this discussion later. I think we should now move on to our neighboring country, Italy. And I will now introduce Alessandro Marinaccio. He's a research director and head of the Laboratory of Occupational and Environmental Epidemiology at INAIL, the National Institute for Insurance Against Accidents at Work. And he's the co-leader of the Work Climate Research Project. He's an epidemiologist focused on the occupational surveillance system with experience in the field of occupational cancer and asbestos-related diseases. And as part of this work climate project, his group has produced several epidemiological evidence on the risk of occupational injuries due to climate change and particularly to heat waves. So thank you very much, Alessandro, for joining, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Markus, for this invitation. I think that it's very important to share our experience in contrasting the effect of climate change. So thank you very much in order to the epidemiological studies, to the research findings, to the policies, and to the operative tools. So thank you very much. I will say something about the Italian experience, some elements of context in this, in my opinion, very, very important study some years ago. You can see the complexity of the relationship between climate change and health and safety at work in order to the increased temperature, the increased air pollution, the UV radiation, extreme events, and the effect on mental health too, the vector-borne diseases, and the industrial transition and emerging sector, as the previous speaker have just said. But we have analyzed in particular the effect from an epidemiological point of view as the first step, the relationship between heat waves in particular and the occupational exposure to heat in general, to the risk of injuries in Italy. The importance of heat wave in this context is underlined also by these United Nations documents. Heat waves are among the most frequent and deadly impacts of climate change. So there is a broad consensus for the prediction that the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of heat waves are increasing all among Europe and not only. And it is an avoidable scenario in the medium period, and Italy and Southern Europe are greatly involved. So at the level of a general population, there are many studies, an increasing number of studies, of epidemiological studies, that have demonstrated the relationship between heat waves and the effect on the general mortality, on the general morbidity. This is one of the most important studies, very recent, published on Nature Medicine, and you can see the broad effect on the general mortality. In the field of occupational health and safety, there are an increasing also number of studies. This is a meta-analysis from Fatima and colleagues, and pooled results suggest that the risk of occupational injuries increased by 1% for 1 degree increased in temperature. And I will say something about the Italian context. There is an important topic that we have to discuss. There is a relationship between the heat waves, the occupational exposure to it, the risk of injuries, but also the effect on productivity. So there is a context of co-benefits. If we will implement operative tool for reduce the risk of injuries, at the same time we obtain a positive effect on productivity, and these are an important context in my opinion. In this meta-analysis by Flores, and colleagues, you can see the data about the relationship between heat waves and the decrease in productivity all along the world. This is our study for trying to answer to the question. There is a epidemiological relationship between heat waves and occupational exposure to extreme temperature in general, cold and heat, and the risk of injuries. This is our first study for Italian context. We have used all the data set by INAIL with respect to all the injuries compensated by the INAIL, the Italian National Institute for Insurance against Injuries at Work. And you can see the clear dose-response relationship that we have estimated. There is a risk of injuries for which the extreme temperature have an indirect role in the genesis of injuries, and there is a specific higher relative risk for younger workers. This is an important anti-intuitive results, but is confirmed by many epidemiological studies and by almost all the meta-analysis of these studies. An higher risk for the younger workers, for the workers in small firm, and for some specific sector. Construction, in our analysis, this is the specific analysis for construction workers. You can see the high risk of injuries for exposure higher than 95 percentile. Again, a risk for younger workers in construction sector, specific job that are involved, specific modality of injuries that are involved, and specific industrial plant or sites. This is the analogous studies by our group for agriculture sector, and you can see again the evidence of a specific risk for younger workers, and there is a new finding about the relevance of the type of contract. For seasonal workers, the risk of injuries is higher with respect to workers with regular contract. So this is our last studies about this. It's simply an update of our previous study, and we have estimated, as you can see, a large number of heat-related injuries per year in Italy among all the Italian territory, and at the same time, a substantial decrease in productivity for 1 degree of increase in temperature in intense work activity. The economic impact is huge. This is the specific analysis for productivity, and the decrease in workability is in relationship with the range of temperature. So the conclusion is about this is that prevention measures and adaptation strategies can contribute both at the same time for containing the risk of injuries and for avoiding the loss in productivity in a co-benefits perspective. This is there is a possibility to predict what will happen in the future according to different climate and meteorological scenarios and demographic scenarios. And this is the epidemiological study that have investigated particularly the fatal injuries, the risk of death at work. We have estimated 15 deaths per year due to extreme heat at work in our country, again, in particular in agriculture and construction, and there is a great risk also for nationality non-Italian, for migrant worker substantially. Migrant worker is a great theme, is a great topic, and is a great concern in our country. Sectoral analysis have documented in agriculture, particularly in agriculture, the need of specific training activities on the risk due to occupational exposure to extreme heat, because migrant workers are vulnerable groups, as the epidemiological studies have demonstrated, due to potential cultural, contractual, and also religious and social barrier. In this context, there is a need, as European Commission underlined, to implement technical measures and organization measures for contrasting the effect of climate change. So World Climate Experience, World Climate is a research project in collaboration between INAIL and the Council of Research in Italy. In this context, we have implemented a alert system for all the Italian territory. The alert platform at the site www.worldclimate.com is a platform for the territorial analysis of the level of exposure and health risk for workers due to extreme temperature. You can change the modality of work and the intensity of physical activity. So the results of the consultation of the sites is the occupational health risk prediction. So not meteorological prediction, but the prediction of the health risk for workers with extreme territorial details, 2 kilometers for 2 kilometers for all Italian territory, 4 hours and 5 days of temporal resolution, and the prediction are available by job, sector, age, and condition and level of acclimatation. Our site in the summer of 2025 has registered a very large number of visits, particularly in the period of the peak of heat waves. And what happened is that many regions, Italy is divided in 20 regions, and in the summer of 2025, 18 of these, almost all of the Italian region, have implemented regional law for suspending the work in some specific sector of activity, generally in agriculture and in construction sector, but with some difference between regions, in the condition for which World Climate Project predicted a specific high risk for the health of workers. So, in my opinion, I think that this is a substantial example of the relationship between epidemiological research or scientific research in general and the policies, the public policies in the OSH sector. So I think that my time is over. So I am an epidemiologist. So I close with a sentence that I like too much. Without data, there is no problem, and without problem, there is no action. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Round of applause. Perfect. I think this rounds up very well, because there is also, some information about the heat alert system, and I think this can be, I think, maybe a focus of this first discussion, to also give other people and member states and countries the opportunity to talk about their system, if they have like such heat alert systems in place, or other experiences and questions regarding the presentation so far. We do have a question. The first one would be to you, Alessandro. Do you have an explanation why younger workers are more affected than workers who are more than 60 years old?
Yes, it's in my opinion is a very important finding, and is a not intuitive finding. So it's very important to try to understand the reasons. I have to say preliminarily that is findings obtained also in many others experiences. So in Spain, in Australia, in Canada, in many countries, there are epidemiological study and meta-analysis also that have confirmed the results. An higher risk of injuries, of indirect injuries due to the exposure to extreme heat and cold for younger workers. I think that the explanation is the circumstance that young workers have a low perception of risk, and they think to be strong, healthy, and there is no problem. There is the sun, okay, there is the sun. It's not a problem. I think that there is a lack of perception. This is, in my opinion, we have some findings in some surveys that have confirmed this hypothesis. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Maybe in this context, I can also add that we're currently trying to have a small information campaign, which also targets young workers at construction sites, because of course this is an affected group. And something that I think is a very positive example is from Switzerland. They had this information campaign where you have kind of like a split screen of a relatively young worker. With on the one hand you have the normal skin, the young skin. On the other side you have the old skin, the aged look that you get if you are exposed to a lot of UV radiation. So this is also something that we're trying to do to really focus on younger workers in the context of heat. So thank you for your comment, Alessandro. There's another question or a comment. I think there's some people in the waiting room. For the epidemiological data on health impact, it must be very difficult to determine the exact impact on workers. If workers potentially have underlying conditions which were unknown or not acclimatized, or they have poor diet or undertake activities outside of normal work hours which contribute to their health impact, for example, going for a run outside at lunchtime and then suffering fatigue and heat stress during work hours. So if you want to respond to that comment, Alessandro, or
yes, I think that the comment is correct. The epidemiological studies always provide some results in probability for a collective. So obviously there is a problem of individual condition with respect to chronic disease, with respect to acclimatation, with respect to all others individual condition. But epidemiological studies are essential, in my opinion, to provide a framework of knowledge. And we have to use these findings in the correct way for what they could provide.
Thank you. In this context, I can also remember you telling me that it might be good for more countries to have like this cross-country collaboration regarding, for example, accidents and heat. And maybe if other countries or people here are familiar with projects being done in their country, maybe also put them into the chat or some experts that maybe we can then connect to not only have the country perspective, but maybe also have a cross-country perspective in the field of science. Are there any other questions or experiences with, again, maybe focus on heat alert systems? How is it in other countries or other projects in this field? Yes, there is a Georgos Kal. I can pronounce the name. I'm so sorry.
Give me a second.
Mhm.
Give me a second. Yes. Okay. My name is George Kalogeropoulos. I'm from Department of Labor Inspection in Cyprus. So I'd like to thank everybody for your insightful presentations. And you would allow me to start by briefly explaining the context of Cyprus, because I think it's essential to understand our approach. Cyprus is among the member states most severely affected by climate change, particularly in relation to rising temperatures, water scarcity, and prolonged heat exposure. These conditions, of course, have a direct impact and measurable impact on our key sectors of economy, such as agricultural, construction, and outdoor services, as you mentioned before, where workers are exposed to heat for extended periods. Here, without effective intervention, we would be facing a significantly higher number of heat-related incidents, and what was previously noted, potentially fatalities, serious illness, etc. And so Cyprus had to move beyond conventional approaches and adopt a more structured and proactive system. Of course, we have the general guidances by our department mostly, and awareness. But we moved to an enforceable and data-driven system for managing heat stress at work. First, the use of measurable microclimatic indicators, as also now Austria, and I was amazed to see that. Congratulations, Austria, about that. And we use the corrected active temperature, which allows to translate the environmental condition into clear thresholds, which is linked to physiological impact. We have also integrated meteorological forecasting into occupational safety and health policy. Heat warnings issued by the meteorological department are not treated as advisory information, but rather they trigger specific legal obligations, including mandatory work restrictions and, under certain conditions, complete cessations of outdoor works. Imagine that here we often have in July, August, and September 45 degrees, and in some cities of Cyprus, like Limassol, above 60% of humidity, which makes condition outdoor difficult. And we have ensured that these elements are operationalized through enforceable mechanisms, including labor inspection, mandatory record keeping, and clearly defined employer responsibilities. So that's what we did. We embedded within the legal obligation for risk assessment, and we implemented that through the code of practice and the work rest tables that we have in our code of practice. So the system does not rely on planning or risk assessment. It defines when and how work must be adjusted and stopped. At the same time, I would like to stress an important point, also supported by recent research, and maybe it was noted there. that most heat-related incidents do not occur during extreme heat waves, but during typical hot working days. And this means that we must operate continuously and not only during emergency conditions. That's what it wasn't in detail, but that's what happens in Cyprus today from our perspective, from the Department of Labor Inspection. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's wonderful and very interesting. I think I've read this code of practice once, and just to be sure, so there are measures. It's measures being explained, right? And this code,
Organizational technical measures that
yeah.
it provides also information. It's a complete guide, I would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of the situation that if the company does the measures, then they're fine. They kind of are in line with the law. But there are also so the code of practice is not obligatory, right? It's just a safety guide, sort of, and that companies can also take different
It's
measures.
sort of obligatory because it's in the law. In the law,
Okay.
it's part of the law, let's say. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
obligatory. Of course, it's it's written in the code. You can according the risk assessment, you can do more, or you can do
Mm-hmm.
site specific things. If that works better than the code of practice, then this is acceptable.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Kilian O'Shea. O'Shea. You have a question or a remark?
Can you hear me, Markus?
Yes, perfect.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you made a good attempt at my name.
Sorry, you can do it again so that I know now.
Fine. I work for the Electricity Supply Board in Ireland. We're a utility, and I've had a lot of experience of working worldwide, from Bahrain to in the Middle East to different parts of the world. But it's interesting to see the dynamics of the legislation and the enforcement of legislation across Europe reacting to the changes in climate change. And what's interesting about it is, Austria are proactively doing something about it. You can see it with Malta there in the chat, different, and and Italy, and trying to understand the actual risk. And it's like it's creeping up through Europe in regards to, as the legislations are changing, as the climate is changing, which is interesting to see that evolution. Mike, I mentioned it earlier on, but I think one critical element of it, and it's good that you have all these people on this call with high levels of expertise and quite interested in the topic. The problem is, outside of this bubble, is trying to get organizations the expertise increased in regards to the competency. And one of the most critical elements is the assessment of risk and the decision making that has to happen therewith, with regards to, do we stop work? Do we actually, what interventions do we do? What advice should I be given? So the competency across Europe, in my mind, in regards to providing expertise, has to increase in order to make informed decision making, and also recognizing the want and the needs of organizations and workers, like in regards to being feeling protected, but also organizations want to be profitable. So you have to kind of see how that balance could be struck. And by having legislation from an enforcement perspective is one driver, but the other part is actually the information as regards awareness and competency with regards to the informed decision making. And that's just from my own views of having worked across the world with the organization that I work with, and having done and completed training with the British Occupational Hygiene Society as well, and trying to be more informed, and for me as a person to give more professional and informed decisions, and information and assessment of risk, even down to assessing the temperature. something as basic as that, what techniques you employ, what methodology you employ. And that's why I think sometimes with EU-OSHA, it's probably important to get into that space when actually setting out guidelines and requirements for the person or persons that are giving that advice. That's just my own few thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. Do you maybe, to add on that, do you have experience with projects who are trying to increase the competence, or do you have any good practice examples from Ireland or Great Britain in general?
Yeah, there's definitely with regards to the BOHS training, the thermal environment, it is available through the BOHS website, and they do have the syllabus and information and references to the various different standards, ISO standards, etc., that have been issued over the last while. But I expect those standards to be revised in light of the changes and challenges with the changing environment. And I know my other question with regards to the thermal environment, we call it the thermal environment. The focus at the moment is on heat stress and the heat impact in the more, I suppose, hotter climates, but there also is impact on a person's heat stress during cold environments because of the work that they do and also the PPE that they wear. And in speaking with Ministry of Defence in the UK as well, the occupational hygienists there, they've experienced problems where people in the winter months have suffered heat stress because of the activities that they do and also the PPE that they wear. So it is not just localized to during the hotter summer months, but also the protection of workers during the winter months and also in the environments that they work in.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting and yeah, important to consider here as well. Yeah. I also see a comment from Malta, which I will read quickly. Good morning, and thank you for the information so far. In Malta, we have taken a number of initiatives with regards to the protection of workers from climate change, including information campaigns on various media, distribution of leaflets to all households, as well as posters to all businesses. In the case of legislation, OSHA and Malta introduced two administrative instruments in 2025 and in 2026. And yeah, the links are in the chat if someone is interested. We're of course saving them as well and put them into the protocol. Yeah, if you want to access that later. But thank you very much to all so far. I think this is very much the spirit of today's workshop to also have the experiences and opinions of other countries represented. We still have maybe we can take 5 minutes until we take a first break if someone wants to chip in and yeah, talk about their experiences. Oh, perfect. Thank you for adding the link. I don't see any hands anymore. So I guess we will have an earlier break, but we don't make it longer. We just try to maybe end earlier. So I would suggest starting again at 10:50. We will have some very interesting presentations from Finland, Spain, and Germany, so don't miss that. And yeah, I will see you again at 10:50. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Feel free to turn on the camera again. And we will continue with our colleague from Finland, Jutta Karkulehto. She works as a researcher in work physiology at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health in Oulu, Finland, in the unit of comprehensive security in working life. In addition, she is a doctoral student at the University of Oulu, Faculty of Medicine, where she does her doctoral dissertation focusing on work in hot conditions. Thank you very much, Jutta, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank Markus. Thanks for the invitation for this webinar. It is a pleasure to be here today. So, my name is Jutta Karkulehto, and I am a researcher at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, based here in Oulu, Finland. Today I'll introduce the HeatFit project, risk management for hot work, work rest cycle recommendations for physically demanding work. Our aim was to provide practical evidence-based guidance to help employers and workers manage heat strain in physically demanding work. This study has been funded by the Finnish Work Environment Fund. I'll first give a brief context for why updated guidance is needed, then share our key recommendations and how they will be implemented at the workplace level. Finland's climate is becoming warmer in all seasons, and long heat periods have become more common in recent years. Without a warming trend, the warmest years would be randomly distributed across decades, but instead, many of the warmest years are now concentrated in the past 10 to 15 years. People living and working in subarctic climate zone are generally better adapted to cold than to heat. Finnish or northern population in general may experience adverse health effects from heat at lower temperatures than population in warmer parts of Europe. A minimum mortality temperature varies across Europe, and it mirrors the local climate. It means the temperature which mortality is lowest. In Northern Europe, including Finland, mortality is lowest at quite cool temperatures, around 13 to 17 degrees Celsius. In Central Europe, it is about 17 to 21 degrees, and in Southern Europe, it's about 22 to 26 degrees Celsius. Finland's average annual temperature is only about +4 degrees, but the annual temperature range is very wide, from roughly about -35 degrees to +35 degrees Celsius. We have also 4 seasons, and the temperatures can vary a lot, even within the same season. As a result, this makes it more difficult for people in the north to adapt in increasing heat. In addition, the physiological adaptation to heat usually requires continuous exposure for about 2 weeks. In northern conditions, heat periods may be too short, irregular, or sudden for full adaptation to develop. Heat strain is expected to increase in many occupational tasks, especially in outdoor work. And we all know that heat has direct effects on the body, work performance, recovery, and safety. When a person works in hot conditions, the cardiovascular system has to work harder to support both physical work and the heat loss from the body. A cardiovascular load can increase up to about 25%. At the same time, higher muscle temperature can increase fatigue and reduce muscle strength. Heat also affects the brain, impairing concentration, decision-making, and reaction time, and this may increase the risk of accidents. And from the workplace perspective, heat load also reduces productivity. So, why aren't the current recommendations enough? Our key point in our study is the workload. Heat risk is not coming from the air temperature alone. Same temperature can be tolerable during light work, but much more demanding during heavy work. Recovery time also matters. A short break may not be enough if the workload is heavy. At the moment, there are no binding occupational limit values for thermal conditions in Finland. The commonly used 10 to 15 minutes break per hour rule is a simplified guidance based on the international standards. It can be useful in general, but it does not fully take account for the level of physical workload or the duration needed for the recovery. This is why the updated recommendations are needed. The HeatFit project addresses the heat exposure from new perspectives. The HeatFit project had three main aims. First, we wanted to determine how moderate to heavy physical work in hot environments affects physiological strain. In other words, we wanted to understand how the body responds when demanding work is performed in hot conditions. Second, based on these findings, our aim was to develop evidence-based recommendations for the work rest schedules. The focus was especially on moderate to heavy work, where workload plays the major role in heat strain and recovery. Third, we wanted to assess how prepared Finnish workplaces are for working in heat. For this, we used survey data collected earlier to understand what kind of practices, concerns, and gaps already exist. The HeatFit project ended 6 months ago. The studies combined controlled laboratory measurements with an analysis of the survey data. These two parts were analyzed separately, each addressing a different aspect of heat exposure at work. The laboratory study was conducted in a climate chamber at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health in Oulu. Each participant completed cycling trials at 20, 30, and 40 degrees Celsius on separate occasions. The workload was individually determined based on VO2 max testing, ensuring that the intensity corresponded moderate and heavy work, rather than using a fixed workload for all the participants. Here in this slide, the measurement protocol is illustrated. Participants completed repeated cycling bouts at the same workload, each followed by recovery period. During exercise, the bout continued until the body temperature reached 38 degrees Celsius. This level is commonly used as a conservative threshold indicating increased heat strain. After each work bout, participants entered recovery, which continued until the core temperature decreased below 37.5 degrees. This value is the upper limit of normal core temperature. This cycle of work and recovery was repeated 3 times, followed by a longer recovery period at the end. Here I summarize the main outcomes that was measured in the laboratory study. We assessed physiological strain for multiple perspectives. First, we measured core temperature, including the time to overheat and cool down. Skin temperature were also recorded. Cardiovascular and respiratory strain were evaluated through heart rate and blood pressure. At the muscular level, we measured muscle electrical activity by EMG, as well as maximal muscle strength and structure changes assessed by ultrasound. In addition, we collected self-reported exertion, recovery, and thermal comfort. We also tracked body mass changes and assessed cognitive performance. I won't go through all the results in detail due to time limitations, but I will highlight the key findings here. The results show that heat strain begins to accumulate already at early stage. Under moderate to heavy workloads, especially in higher temperatures, existing work rest schedules may not be sufficient to keep core temperature at the safe level. In heavy work, core temperature can exceed 38 degrees within about 30 minutes, and it may rise again quite quickly within 20 minutes, even after the recovery periods. Based on these comprehensive laboratory measurements, the recommendations were developed to illustrate how heat strain can accumulate even if the breaks are taken. We also observed that the core temperature typically returns to its baseline within about 45 to 60 minutes of rest. And this supports the inclusion of one longer break during the workday. And it is important to know that these recommendations are not intended as a full workday timetable, but rather as a practical tool for risk assessment and work planning. And here are the key findings from the Climate Change and Work Survey. Various heat preparedness measures are already in place in Finnish workplaces, but their prevalence varies a lot. Preparedness is more common in work with higher heat exposure, like outdoor work. But even in high-risk workplaces, not all necessary measures are in place. For example, guidance, training, or the ability to adjust work in the heat. We also found differences between age groups. Older employees reported better awareness of heat preparedness than younger employees. In addition, many respondents were not aware of existing measures, indicating gaps in communication and training. Overall, these findings highlight the need to further develop of heat preparedness practices in working life. Finally, a few words on implementation. Based on our laboratory measurements, taking breaks is the key way to reduce the health risks caused by heat and physical workload. For this reason, it is important to make this information widely available and easy to use in practice. We have compiled the recommendations into practical posters, which are freely available from our website. There are two versions, one of employees and one for employers and supervisors, and they are also available in English. You can access them easily using these QR codes on this slide. In addition, more comprehensive information is already available in our website, mainly in Finnish. These recommendations are also reflected in the National Heat Preparedness Action Plan led by the Finnish Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, which highlights the need to update existing guidance and replace outdated occupational safety recommendations with the latest evidence from the HeatFit project. The plan also proposes establishing a dedicated a knowledge repository for heat preparedness. Finally, there is a clear need to raise awareness of this information to employers, employees, occupational safety organizations, and occupational health services. We will continue working to promote these recommendations and to support safe work in hot conditions now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jutta. Round of applause. The hands are coming in. Perfect. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation and for the findings of your project. Are there any ad hoc questions? But again, I recommend saving them for later, or at least putting them into the chat, and we save them for the discussion later. And we, I think, continue with Stefanie from Bühn from Germany. Stefanie Bühn is a public health scientist who specializes in the effects of climate change on health and safety in the workplace. Through her work at an accident insurance agency and at the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, she combines practical experience with a policy perspective to ensure that working conditions remain safe, healthy, and sustainable in the face of climate-related challenges. Thank you very much, Stefanie, for joining and for presenting today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Markus. I hope that you can hear me well. Is it okay? Okay.
Yes.
So I will speak in my presentation about how we try to beat the heat in Germany, and I will give a short insight into a guideline to develop a heat protection plan in the workplace. So I have to switch here. So climate change in general, and especially raised temperatures, heat waves, and tropical nights are big challenges in occupational safety and health in Germany. And heat is now one of the leading health risks in Germany, and with a high burden of morbidity and mortality rates. And I brought you some workplace-related facts. So we see that 60% of employees feel affected by heat, with 40 of them feel moderately and 23 of them feel severely affected. And data of health insurance funds found that a number of workdays lost due to heat is rising. We also see that on days with over 30 degrees, there are more accidents at work and on the way to work. And we commissioned a study of the Federal Ministry, and this study outcomes were about the economic costs. And we found out that one day with over 30 degrees costs approximately 431 million euros. And this was mainly due to productivity loss. So we see it's a huge problem, and now I will give you a short overview how the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs addresses the impact of climate change. Climate change, as I stated, creates new risks and increased risks of occupational safety and health. And because of this urgency, we performed a multi-stakeholder dialogue during two years, and we performed workshops about different topics on health and UV radiation, on extreme weather events, on communication and psychology impacts, and on other hazards like allergens and chemical substances. And we brought together scientists, occupational safety and health experts, social partners and businesses, and we were talking about the risk and also about the protective measures we already have or we have to implement. And our focus was on the legal and workplace requirements, on protective measures, to get some examples of best practices, and in general to raise awareness on this topic in Germany. So one of the most pressing risks we identified was the heat problem, how to work safe and healthy during seasonal heat and heat waves. There is a lack of awareness and also a lack of protection measures, while in some workplaces there are already some measures implemented, but not at all. So we have to raise awareness, and we had this heat protection plans, which may help to close the gap to bring something to the companies which can help them to implement, to develop and implement heat measures in the workplace. Yes, and we developed a practical guide together with a research project. We developed the framework in collaboration with various occupational safety and health experts in Germany, and we tested it across 5 different companies. One was a hospital, one was a government agency, another one was an energy supplier, and the other one was also in the ambulant caretaking sector. So now I will give you a short overview of the heat health protection plan, how it looks like. So first, why is it worthwhile? So it protects employees' health and safety in the long run, and also it keeps workflows running smoothly and prevents interruption of operations. And also it safeguards other assets like patients, products, and so on. And in practice, this means we have to systematically identify risks. We have to take different perspectives into account. We have to develop and communicate measures. And also we have to integrate it into operational process for further development. So this is how this plan looks like. It's based a little bit on the way a risk assessment works. There are 6 steps, and now I will briefly outline this in the following slides. So the first step is to identify all relevant groups of people who should be involved in the process. So a key personnel may include, for example, occupational health and safety officers, the occupational health management, representatives of the management itself or technical staff, the works council, or the company doctors. So all these people have to come together to develop this heat health protection plan. Next step is that we have to group areas and work activities with similar risks, because not all workers are affected by heat and UV radiation to the same extent. And it therefore makes sense to group similar tasks together in so-called clusters. For example, by grouping, by making groups of indoor and outdoor workers, but also groups of people who have to wear protective clothing or who has to working shifts, for example. The next step is then to determine temperature and assessing heat and UV exposure. So I didn't tell you that this plan is not only about heat, it's also about UV radiation. So we put all these two risks together in this plan. So now you have to assess these risks, and the plan will also contain some detailed information about how to measure these risks and how to do in the workplace with different ways to do it. So you have some guidelines how to measure the risks, and if you have measured it, it comes to the next step, which is to define and implement measures. Firstly, it's advisable to carry out which measures are already there, and then to see if they are suitable or if you need more measures for the risks, and then to establish the measures following the top principle, technical measures first, then organizational measures second, and personal measures last, as you can see on the photos. And you should also have the time perspective into account, that you have short-term and long-term measures, like short-term, like drinking water or putting water at the workplace, and long-term is something like planting trees or something which takes more time, technical measures you have to implement to put on. So this is the step 4, and we go further to step 5, which is about communicating these measures. Sometimes companies have already some measures, but they are not reaching employees, so that employees doesn't know we have some heat protection measures in our company. And one step will be to see how the communication works, and also to see how to improve communication. You can use occupational safety trainings. There you could train heat emergency cases, like first aid in heat emergency. And you can also communicate through other communication channels. Messages should always be easy to understand, action-orientated, and tailored to the target audience. And it should be credible and relevant to everyday life, work life. So the next step then, if you have communicated the plan and the measures, you should see if the plan works, and to see what went well and what need to be adjusted for further development of the heat protection plan. So these are the steps, and we have a big download option where you can get some materials with going deeper in some topics. And I'm sorry, it's only on German yet. Perhaps we will translate it once in English. But this is what we worked out in this research project. So let me draw some conclusions. So tools like guidelines for workplace heat protection plans make implementation far easier in practice and help to facilitate implementation. This was also what the companies which took part in this research project told us. Climate adaptation in occupational safety and health is a joint task. So we have to raise awareness of heat protection at every level among policymakers, social partners, occupational safety authorities, and also in the workplace. We have to support especially small businesses with limited financial and human resources. And to encourage them to implement heat protection measures. And we shouldn't we should do climate adaptation without making the problem worse. For example, while only using energy-intensive air conditioning. On the other way, we should use synergies between climate adaptation and climate protection, as we can see, for example, by removing sealed surfaces and creating green spaces. So this we should always have into account. And we should first implement climate-friendly measures before others. Another point is that we should harmonize measures and campaigns we have in Germany, so that companies could better prepare without being overwhelmed by the information overload and perhaps distracting information. And now what we are doing next, we are now currently developing a web-based app to help address climate change impacts in the workplace. This we do with different stakeholders from occupational safety and health level and the German Weather Service. And we hope to test the first version in the summer months, and that we could implement this tool as a helpful practical device that can be used by the companies. So I will close with a statement that climate change is fundamentally transforming the world of work, but by collaborating between science policy and practice, and as well as across national borders, as we do today, we can ensure that workplaces remain safe, healthy, and resilient, even in the face of climate change. So thank you very much. Let's stay in contact and stay in touch. I look forward for your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Again, round of applause. Yeah, it was very interesting. I mean, I know the Handlungshilfe, the action plan. I've read it and it's very nice, and it also gave us some inspiration or some measures that we also adopted in our checklist. So thank you very much for that. And if you have any questions, I see there's one question. Maybe we'll take that before we go on to the last presentation of today. So in your experience, opinion across Europe, open to all countries. Oh, this is to everyone now. In your experience or in your opinion, what is the level of enforcement intervention of the requirements for ensuring the safety of the workers, where high temperatures, high UV has been determined? Have we seen stoppages of work or other enforcement? Has it increased? So this, if someone wants to give an immediate reply. I can quickly talk from the Austrian perspective. I don't think that it has happened that a workplace has been shut down because of heat. I do know that now, of course, enforcement will be intensified, and I also know that indoors there are also some actions being taken if the burden is too high. And also know from a Baltic country, I don't know which one, but that they are also quite strict when it comes to excessive temperatures indoors, that the labor inspector also enforces there. But for the rest, I will have to see, at least in the Austrian case, for this summer. I guess in Germany, there's not you don't have too much insight into the labor inspection side, probably, or Because it's quite complicated in Germany, Stefanie. Yeah.
No, we don't have any data about this. So
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
interesting.
Any other experiences regarding enforcement in the member states? Or other questions, ad hoc questions to Stefanie? Okay, then we continue with our final presentation in Germany, occupational safety authorities are just beginning to pay closer attention to the risks posed by climate change and to take them into account in their oversight activities. Thank you for that contribution. I can also, this is also maybe something to stress, to also educate labor inspectors, right? I think this is one major learning for us, that it starts within their own organization. And this was really a focus of this year. And so we hope that it was successful. But there was some awareness raising required, I think, in some like in all of the organizations. So we're also at the beginning. Okay, then I give the floor to María, José, Santiago, Valentín. I've probably pronounced all the names today incorrectly, but it's fine, I hope. She's currently the coordinator of the Public Advisory Unit within the Technical Subdirectorate of the INSST. Her primary responsibilities involve issues related to climate change and the ecological transition. She also coordinates the INSST's work by thematic area in the field of industrial hygiene and the free public service Prevention 10.es, which is one of the online risk assessment tools within the EURA and IRAD framework. So thank you very much for being here, and we're excited for your presentation.
Okay, so thank you for inviting us. As you said, I am work in the National Institute for Safety and Health at Work in Spain, and I had the pleasure also of being part of the Working Party on Climate Change and OSH of the Advisory Committee on Health and Safety at Work in the European Commission. And my presentation today explains the situation in Spain regarding the regulation, the legislation on climate change and OSH, which of course include heat at work provisions. And I will also dedicate the last part to outlining the awareness campaigns carried out by the institute where I work in. And I don't know, sorry, I had a little problems with that, with the presentation, sorry. Okay, because I can't change.
Maybe if you click on the screen, or if, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's not working. Okay.
Here, I can change.
Here, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So let's begin with the current state of the legislation that establishes some provisions related to heat or other environmental conditions. We have, in addition to the General Prevention Law, which is arising from the Framework Directive, we have the Decree on Workplaces that is currently in force. It's from 1997. These regulations set out certain provisions designed to prevent risk associated with unsuitable working conditions, and also take into account the need for these conditions to be as comfortable as possible for the performance of work, like taking into account, for example, extreme temperatures, humidity, annoying droughts, excessive light or direct solar radiation, etc. But it's important to note that these regulations do not apply to certain sectors, such as construction, fishing vessels, agriculture, or mining. just like the directive transposing the workplaces directive. So it therefore focuses on more traditional workplaces, so to speak, where it is easier to control environmental conditions such as an office or a factory. Okay. Our regulation set out the reference values shown in this slide. These are the values for maximum and minimum temperatures. So where the directive says adequate temperatures, our decree says between 17 and 27 Celsius degrees for sedentary work, for example, even though we know 17 degrees is far from being a comfortable temperature when you are doing sedentary work. So our technical recommendation is to be between 23 and 26 degrees for this situation of sedentary work. This is just an example, but we have all these reference values also for relative humidity, for droughts, related to the environmental conditions. So we use numerical values, and this can have its advantages, namely that everything is crystal clear. It's very easy to check if we are in or out. But it can also have its drawbacks, such as the fact that it may not be suitable for all situations and may not meet all requirements. Sorry. This legislation, the Workplaces Decree, was amended in 2023 following a summer in which 7 workers died from heat stroke, to include a number of additional provisions for outdoor work. What this part establishes is that appropriate measures must be taken to protect workers from any risks associated with adverse weather conditions, including extreme temperatures. In order to establish these measures, we must start with the results of the risk assessment. This is said also in the legislation, and it's also established that we must take into account not only the characteristics of each hazard, so it's a temperature, relative humidity, but also the nature of the task being carried out and the characteristics of the person performing them. Okay, so this is 2 characteristics, that we must take into account in our risk assessment. And this part of the legislation also says that preventive measures will include a prohibition on carrying out certain tasks during the hours of the day when adverse weather conditions are present, in cases where health and safety cannot be otherwise guaranteed. This is the literally of the legislation. Okay. The next. Finally, this amendment stipulates that in the event of an orange or a red level warning from the official meteorological agencies, the adaptation of working conditions will be mandatory, including the reduction or modification of the hours of the scheduled working day. So we have a difference here from with Austria. We established the orange as a minimum alert, but the Spanish meteorological agency only have warning systems to air temperature, so it's a little bit different. And well, it's also important to know that this provision, this part of the outdoor work, also applies to workplaces excluded from the directive and from this Spanish regulation scope, which are constructions, means of transport, mines, fishing vessels, and agriculture and forestry. Okay. And as some of you may know, we had a terrible episode of floods in the Mediterranean area of Spain in October 2024. A weather phenomenon known as an isolated high altitude depression, maybe in English is more known as cutoff low, maybe. This phenomenon caused devastating floods that led to the deaths of more than 200 people, some of whom were workers. And in response, the government introduced a series of protective measures for such cases, including 4 days paid weather-related leave, and the obligation to establish protocols for dealing with adverse weather conditions through collective bargaining. Regarding this point, for several years now, the National Collective Agreement for the construction industry has included measures to prevent the risk associated with exposure to heat. And I seem to recall that there are other agreements as well, even if they are not national scope, but there are others. And last but not least, there is a mandate to draw up regulations to protect workers' health and safety from risks associated with climate change. And we are currently working on a technical proposal to manage this risk, which we will look at next. Obviously, this is just a technical proposal. The politicians responsible for implementing it can adopt it or not, but this is our technical proposal. Okay. So let's see it. The main topics or risks to be prevented are heat stress, solar UV radiation, adverse weather events, and episodes of high pollution related to climate change, and vector-borne diseases. For heat at work, we propose to manage this risk as other physical agents. That's including a method to assess it. In this case, we are proposing the double VGT index, which is a method that is widely accepted by the technical community and the scientific community as the best way to manage the risk of heat stress. We are proposing to establish a limit value of 38 degrees in the core body, and several action levels to accomplish the limit value according to the metabolic load or the intensity of the work that's being carried out. So it's a similar way to assess and to manage the risk what we have in other physical risk, like maybe vibration or electromagnetic fields and these other physical agents. Therefore, the factors that we are taking into account for the assessment are air temperature, radiation, humidity, metabolic load of the task or intensity of work, isolation of clothing and protective equipment, and also if there is a lack of acclimatization. Sorry. I can't find my mouse, sorry.
Take your time.
Okay, thank you. To manage the exposure to UV radiation, we propose a system based on monitoring the UV index, which is has been mentioned before, and it's typically provided by meteorological agencies and implementing measures according to the predicted intensity of this index. These measures may include providing shade, avoiding exposure during worst conditions, providing appropriate clothes and protective equipment for the skin and the eyes, and providing sunscreen and specific health surveillance for this topic. We have to know that some of these measures will also be effective in preventing the risk of heat stress, such as providing shade or avoiding the middle of the day when solar radiation and temperatures are at their highest. Okay, and the next topic is adverse weather conditions. For that topic, we propose that extreme weather events to be included in emergency plans in the companies, along with an assessment of the potential adverse effects of each phenomenon, depending on the conditions of the company or the work that's being done. However, we know that this may not be sufficient for certain types of work, such as, for example, power line maintenance or work at height, where it will be necessary to put measures in place based on wind or rainfall or another adverse weather conditions that do not constitute an emergency situation for most of the companies. And we have to consider also that there is an obligation to establish protocols in collective bargaining, so provisions must be in accordance, and we think this could be. And with episodes of high pollution, like, for example, tropospheric ozone or ultrafine particles, the philosophy is the same, to adopt measures when environmental authorities raise an alert of high pollution, especially for those who work outdoors in heavy or low task or high intensity of work. To the final topic is vector-borne diseases, and we are proposing an amendment to the decree on biological agents to highlight the risk of exposure to these vector-borne diseases, which can already be considered a biological risk within the scope of the legislation. But to make this clearer, we are proposing to modify some articles and the annex. Okay. So let's move to the awareness raising campaigns. The first that we launched was related to the topic of today's workshop, and it's called Con sol es tiempo de prevención, or what's the same in English, when the sun shines, it's time for prevention. It was thought as an annual campaign, and we have been running it since 2023 to 2025. And okay, For this campaign, that we ran mostly during the summer months, but this include also May, because temperatures reach nearly 40 degrees last week in many parts of the country. So May is an important month too, even it's spring. And we work to spread the message via social media, and we launch radio adverts too, as well as carrying out specific initiatives like interviews in the traditional media like TV or newspaper. The topics of this campaign were heat stress and solar UV radiation, and there were produced a lot of materials to help people to understand the key preventive measures associated to this risk. And we produce leaflets, posters, banners, decalogue, and it's everything available in our website. Okay, so and alongside 2025, we launched this other campaign, which is like the previous campaign has grown up, and we have developed additional materials for other adverse weather events like floods and extreme cold. This is a video. I don't know if it's running. Yes. And this is the banner of the campaign. So we are now taking into account another adverse weather events. And okay, let's move. This campaign is designed to provide cover, as I said, to other adverse events. And we launch messages at social media mostly, where there is a provision for this event to happen. Okay, we have developed also a collection of fact sheets for each weather event. By now we have developed these 4 fact sheets, but now there is a project to rename this campaign and call it something more related to climate change, because, for example, vector-borne diseases cannot be considered a phenomenon, meteorological phenomenon, and we are trying to focus more on climate change related risk, and the materials are expected to change soon. And finally, we are collaborating with ACT Portugal and our Spanish Labor Inspectorate in the Iberian campaign, Emerging Risk of Climate Change, that is expected to run for a year or maybe more than a year during 2026 and 2027. And aims to inspect, inform, and advise companies on how to prevent risk related or associated with climate change and also with the green transition. They are specifically centered in the waste management sector. And our organization, our institute, provides technical advice to the inspectorate, to the Spanish inspectorate, and we are collaborating with ACT in the communication part too. So this could be an example of what Stefanie said in the last part of her presentation. And that's all. Thank you very much. And let's talk about this.
Thank you very much. Applause again is coming in. Perfect. I think this rounds it up very well. So many interesting projects in Spain, and yeah, good overview of the legislation, but also on projects for the implementation. I open the discussion now. Anyone who has a question or comment or wants to share experiences maybe regarding heat health action plans like Stefanie introduced, or experience with rest breaks from Jutta, or now yeah, from what we've just heard, any comments, questions, feel free. We have a first question. I think is the exception of means of transport, slide 5. I think this is for you, María. Is the exception of means of transport from slide 5 for public transport like train, bus, metro, airplane, boat, or also transport of goods in lorries, trucks?
In Spain, as in the rest of Europe, because the workplaces directive say it so, this means every means of transport is not specified if we are including only transport of goods or transport of travelers, of people. I think it's applied to all.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a question also for you, María, because maybe this is something that many people affect or are talking about. The WBGT index. We also discussed whether this would be an appropriate indicator, but of course it's also a little complex, or especially for small businesses, it might be complicated to measure everything correctly. Equipment is expensive, so how do you deal with this issue?
Well, this is a good question, because maybe this is the most discussed when you are proposing new methods or something like that. But we are thinking about introducing a simplified way to calculate it based on temperature and humidity. And also, we know there are already some simplified systems to measure this index, even that you can plug into your smartphone or something like that, which are not so expensive than the big ones, or the ones that are used by our institution, scientific. But the result could be more or less accurate. So I think this simplified equipment is sufficient enough to have a good idea of the situation. And moreover, we are working on a tool like the Italian colleagues to put in place a prediction of the WBGT index for the next days with a small square of net. So every company can know in advance the index that is expected for the next year, and then you only have to reduce the index, taking into account the intensity of the work and the clothes and the equipment and the acclimatization.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Stefanie, I think you're first.
Yes, thank you, María, for your presentation. I have one question. You stated that tasks are prohibited, and I'm interested which tasks are prohibited, and is it only heavy work, or where's the definition? And my other question is how they solve it in the practice. Do they provide other work? Do they stop work? What's about the payment? Are there also collective bargaining contractions that help us to overcome this situation?
Yes, thank you, Stefanie. That's a very good question too, because the legislation established only that some task may be prohibited when the health and safety of guaranteed in other way. So it's so open and to interpretation and to adapt to every situation. And here, as you said, this obligation to establish the protocols for every adverse weather phenomenon that's also established in the legislation, I think could play an important role, because as the collective bargain or the collective agreement on construction said, they put a more specific situations, more specific criteria to achieve this prohibition of some task at some conditions. But I think this could not be interpreted like a list, closed list, but every company and every work must be studied independently, because every situation is different, and you have also this last part of when the health and safety of workers cannot be protected in other ways. So it's a very open text, and it must be adapted to every situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we have a question in the chat. I think it's also to Maria or Marina. If that's not true, maybe correct me. Did you address different groups of workers in different ways? And perhaps you have an example, for example, language, pictures, or something like that. And second question, were there any negative reactions and how did you manage that? I think this is maybe also tied to the campaign, maybe, or
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Sorry, I am reading it again. So
No worries.
do you mean if we are considering in the campaign materials, for example, migrant workers or something like that?
Yes, and different people in different jobs and so on.
Well, this first awareness raising campaign that we launched in 2023 was mostly centered on outdoor work, because it was like a measure related to this amendment of the legislation for outdoor work. And even we were not, we didn't develop a special material for any work. Pictures and the material was designed to people who were gardeners, fishers, people who work in the construction site. I remember there were I don't know the word in English, when the people who is watching the pools for nobody's getting drowned. And for they are a lot of hours exposed to solar UV radiation, and but we didn't make a special. It was all general materials for everybody.
And were there any negative reactions to that campaign, or if that's the second part of the question?
I don't know, maybe because I don't manage our social media. Maybe some our colleagues of the communication department can say so, but I don't know. As far as I know, everybody is like concerned about our future and the hotter and hotter temperature we are rising every year. And I don't think there were such a bad reaction.
I can maybe also add to that. We were also thinking about how we design this kind of poster that I showed, and it made some negative reactions, I would say, because it's always because our major focus is, of course, somehow construction sites, because they're by number and by type of activity majorly affected. And then we kind of used illustrations which made them more like a comic style. And it made some negative reactions. Of course, it's, you only hear the negative ones, so maybe others were okay with it. But from my learning from that was to really closely collaborate with people at construction sites and to really, for example, go with labor inspectors to a construction site, see what's hanging there, what kind of illustrations are hanging there, so that people there feel well represented, or also, accept the illustration design. So this I can talk from experience a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much, because this is very encouraging, I think, because often you think about the discourses in social media, and they are not the real world in which the reality is accepted and people do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then we maybe have another voice, Georgios. Feel free.
Yes, sorry, I now noticed that I don't have my camera isn't working, so sorry about that. Maybe I could say in Cyprus about the different groups of workers that we do that in a targeted way also. I mean, we focus in highest risk sectors: construction, agriculture, delivery services. But it depends also from the risk assessment of the workplace. I mean, if there are vulnerable groups, workers with health conditions or pregnant workers, or new and returning workers, like we base that on acclimatization. So there should, from the employers, there should be a risk assessment, especially about these vulnerable groups. And regarding the negative reactions here in Cyprus, because there have been negative reactions in relation to work stoppages and reduced productivity during the summer months, where we have a lot of heat episodes, and the operational constraints during the peak hours. And there we try to say to the employers that they should focus also on organizational and technical measures, so as not to have a reduced productivity. That's from site perspective.
Thank you very much. I will now go to the chat for now. So we have a question to María again. How was the decision for the core body temperature of 38 degrees reached? Meaning, do you have any studies to share concerning the health effects linked to certain thresholds? Do workers have to agree to a measuring who gets the data?
Okay, this 38 degrees of core body temperature is accepted as the physiological limit that our body can, accept or recover from. Maybe Jutta, which is carrying out this specifically physiological study in Finland, can provide us with more information, but it is the core temperature body accepted as the limit that we cannot pass.
Yes, it comes from the WHO old studies and NIOSH studies and ISO standards. That's about it.
Yes, and that is not supposed to be measured directly in the core of the worker, because for that we have thought about putting in place these action levels, that are supposed to be an equivalence with the reach of the 38 degrees in the core body.
Thank you. I think with that, we also answered the second question here regarding the 38 degrees. Then there is another question. María, could you please provide more information about the specific health surveillance?
Oh, not yet, because this is supposed to be provided by the medical specialist, the doctors, and the Ministry of Health in Spain, because we are thinking about to monitoring this, especially this these injuries in the eyes or in the skin that solar UV radiation can produce. But we are proposing also to establish a protocol to test or to monitoring the heat stress, other related injuries, which are not only heat stroke or fatigue, but we know there are also chronic diseases that heat stress is producing. So doctors must provide this.
I can also add to that the Austrian case where we have this voluntary medical examination. And this is, from my knowledge, a very basic screening, which already after studying medicine, these people can do, these doctors. So there's no specific education in the frame of skin medicine needed. So a basic studies of medicine is required in Austria. And yeah, we hope that many workers also use this option because it hopefully also prevents skin cancer. And I don't know if this is familiar in other countries, but we always, when we talk about UV radiation, we always reference Germany, who I think white skin cancer is the second, I think, biggest recognized occupational disease. And in Austria, there's still a little bit of lack of data because it has been quite recent that it has been accepted as an occupational disease, but we also expect a similar development like in Germany. So this is a very pressing topic also in Austria right now. Thank you for the comment about the 38 degrees. Georgios, you have another comment or question?
Yeah, to add to that about the health surveillance. In Cyprus, health surveillance in relation to heat stress is addressed through the general framework of occupational health and risk. In practice, this means that the employers through the risk assessment are required to identify, as I said before, workers that are at increased risk, like workers with pre-existing medical condition, pregnant, and workers who are not acclimatized. And then when risks are identified, employers must take appropriate preventive measures about these people, which may include adaptation of work tasks or schedules, increased rest breaks for them, exclusion from heavy work during high heat condition. And thirdly, in big companies where occupational physicians are available, they play also a role in advising on if they're fit for work in hot environments, the acclimatization processes, and identify workers who may require additional protection or restrictions. And but to be precise, we deal with that with a general framework, and there is no fully specifically for heat stress. I mean, but it's through the risk assessment and the general framework. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Georgios. Any other questions? Last chance. So many people working in the field gathered, so use it. I have maybe one question. Maybe someone has experience with the topic of acclimatization, because I know that in the US this is a big topic, and that they really focus on acclimatization plans, etc. And they also made this kind of study from 2012 to 2013, where it was shown that most people who were who died due to heat outdoors were not acclimatized. So in Austria, we're still at the beginning of this topic, because it's also like the question of how can you really do that in a company, acclimatize workers. Does anyone have experience with the relevance and also the practicalities of acclimatization?
Maybe I can tell you what we recommend here in Spain, which is during the first day of heat, just making half of the journey of the day, and then adding plus 10% every day until you have the full day of work. And this is our technical recommendation, but we also say that we can only assume someone is acclimatized when it has happened 2 weeks of work. And you can lose it very easily, because if you are, as Jutta said, in a freshener condition, like 2 or 3 days, you can lose the condition of acclimatization. So it's an interesting question. how to manage this is not easy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we also try to first focus on other measures, and because it's maybe easier to provide shading than to have like an acclimatization plan, especially if there, there's a lack of workers or. But it's for sure an important topic, yeah. Then Stefanie also added that she would be interested in studies about the success of awareness campaign and the use of instrument and tool in practice, like web applications on weather conditions and OSH. I would be also very interested in that. I think this is also what my intention was a little bit with this workshop, to push this topic, because I think it is a little bit underrepresented. So if anyone is familiar with web applications or awareness campaigns, feel free to send them now or later to me or to Stefanie. Okay, I think we anyway had a long day, so maybe Stefanie, as a core organizer, do you want to? I give you the honors. You can end the workshop if you want.
So very spontaneously, thank you. Thank you for this great workshop, for your idea to put this topic on the agenda, and also it was a pleasure to collaborate with you. And yes, I hope that we still keep in touch with this topic, that we could learn from each other. And I think this was a start, perhaps, of a workshop series. Perhaps we could do it again, and then we see how it works and how we could learn from each other. So thank you very much also for your nice and friendly moderation of this workshop.
That's very nice. Thank you also for the collaboration. And just because it was in the chat, the presentations will be sent out, and the workshop, the recording will be published on the Austrian Labor Inspection channel on YouTube. So I will link that also in the presentation. Thank you very much, and have a great remaining day, and hopefully a safe summer. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you.